What's up guys, my name is Ace, and it's finally time for the skill-based matchmaking study, and for me to share my results of this study that I've done this year. This is something that I do every year with Call of Duty, at least for the past several years, and normally with this I will collaborate with some other YouTubers so we can get more data collected and everything, but this time around it doesn't really seem like too many other YouTubers are interested in Vanguard, so I decided to just hop in and do it for myself. But as a result of that, just keep in mind I don't have as many accounts tested as previous years. This is not designed to be a 100% flawless scientific study. This is more so just meant to be seeking out trends and seeing what kind of trends exist with skill-based matchmaking in Vanguard. Now, I still do have a great sample size per account tested, it's just fewer accounts tested, so I have been investing a lot of time and effort into this. It's taken me about a month to put this all together, so I hope you guys can appreciate the amount of time and effort that goes into something like this. And let's just start it off with the basic methodology of my testing and data collection, just so we're all on the same page here, because it is important to be mentioning this kind of stuff. So what I did with this is I have 3 different accounts. One account is a low skill account. This is where I use my bot account that I normally just use for testing, and I purposely played with that as if I was a really bad player. I didn't reverse boost this, I didn't kill myself over and over. I just played many games acting like I'm a significantly below average player. Then I have an average account, big thanks to Soshi for lending me his account for this, because he has fairly average stats, a little bit above average, but somewhere within the realm of average at least. And then I have my main account, which has significantly above average stats. Basically, every important stat on this account is within the top 10% of players in the world. Now, with each one of these accounts, I played 10 games and I recorded all the data for every single player I ran into in the past 10 games. So that's the data we're going to be looking at today, and just keep in mind with this, in order to keep everything controlled, I limited this to one game mode, but I selected Team Deathmatch since this is always the most popular game mode in Call of Duty. And I also limited it to just the tactical combat pacing. I didn't want to get things too overcomplicated. I was trying to control as many variables as possible, so this is only looking at tactical pacing team deathmatch. I know many of you guys are probably curious how combat pacing affects skill-based matchmaking, but unfortunately that would require an entirely new study and another month of testing just to put that together to compare it to this. So I controlled those variables as much as I could. Also, this was all done while playing solo with crossplay enabled to maximize my player pool, and also to maximize my player pool, I did all of my data collection during the weekend, during peak hours where there's the biggest possible player base to be pulling from. Because the larger the player base, the more accurate data we're going to be getting here. Now, the main stats that I honed in on here and focused on, because these are the ones that are most representative of player skills. I know that there's no one single stat that is a perfect representation of a player's skill, but these are the best that we have. I focused on the career kill-death ratio, so their total kill-death ratio throughout the life cycle of Vanguard, the kill-death ratio of every person I ran into for the previous 5 games before I ran into them in that lobby, because in recent years, we did find out that recent performance seems to really have a heavy weighting on your skill-based matchmaking, like more so than your career kill-death ratio, and this is why you often see really frequent swings from easy lobbies to difficult lobbies. Also, the score per minute limited to the team deathmatch game mode, because global score per minute's a meaningless stat because it depends heavily on the game mode you play. So I was just looking at the score per minute of players in team deathmatch in particular. And then I also collected data on the platform that the players are playing on, as well as the input they were using to see if there's any changes there. Then I collected data on how long it took to get into the match from the moment I started matchmaking, as well as the latency to the server in each of the games, keeping in mind there were no changes whatsoever to my network. I'm playing from the exact same network with all the same settings. Now finally, I also tried to get an indication of parties. Whenever possible, I labeled who was partied with who in the lobbies, and I color-coded them based on their parties, but keep in mind with this one, the game isn't perfect with showing you everybody that's partied up with each other when you look at your recent players, which is the only place to really have a look at that. So it's very likely that I missed some parties that were in some of these lobbies just because the game wasn't displaying it, but I did display all the parties that were confirmed to be playing together. So there we have it. That's a process I went through, the data that I collected, and of course, I will leave a link to my spreadsheet down below so you guys can check all this data out for yourself so you can see I'm not just making these numbers up or anything. And without further ado, let's just dive into the data that I collected. And we'll start it off with our career kill-death ratio. And as you can see here with my main account, the exclusive Ace, my kill-death ratio going into this is 1.95. This is kill-death ratio, not elimination death ratio, by the way. And the average of all of the players that I ran into in 10 games was 1.06. So a little bit above average, but not significantly above average by any means. Then when it comes to Soshi's account, he's the one that has the more average stats. With his main account, his kill-death ratio at the time of this testing was 1.06, and the average kill-death ratio of the people he ran into in 10 games was 0.93. And then finally, for my exclusive bot account, the one that I played significantly below average, the kill-death ratio on that one was 0.66, and the average kill-death ratio of the lobbies was 0.84. So there definitely appears to be some correlation here. Obviously, you'd need far more accounts to get a super accurate correlation value, which is why there's no point in me even sharing R-squared values with you guys for 3 accounts. But you can see that the higher the skill of your accounts, the higher the career kill-death ratio on average is going to be with the players that you're running into. But that's the career stats, and like I said, over the past couple years, your recent performance seems to be more of an indicator of what kind of lobbies you'll get into compared to your career stats. So let's look at the average kill-death ratios from the past 5 games. And for my main account, when I started this testing, my past 5 game average kill-death ratio was 2.3, whereas the average for every player I ran into in the lobby for their past 5 games, leading up to the game where I ran into them, was 1.18. So that's definitely a higher number than the career kill-death ratio stats that we saw earlier. Then when it comes to Soshi's stats, he had a 0.97 and his lobbies were 0.90. And then finally with my bot account, I averaged a 0.7 KD in the past 5 games and the lobby average was 0.83. So again, there is a pretty clear correlation there. The better your recent performance has been, the more likely you are to run into other people that have had good recent performance. And once again, just like the previous couple years, this correlation appears to be stronger than the career kill-death ratio stat. But next up, let's move on to our score per minute stats. Again, keeping in mind this is just limited to team deathmatch, so I went through for each of the accounts that I ran into, and I found out what their career team deathmatch score per minute stat was. And for the main account, it was 397 for myself, and my lobbies were 261. For Soshi, it was 282 for his account, and the lobbies were 231. And then finally, for my exclusive bot account, the account score per minute was 114, and the lobby average was 207. Which, once again, we do see a correlation here. The higher your score per minute is, the higher the average score per minute will be with the enemies that you're running into. And based on all of this combined, we can pretty clearly see that obviously there is still a skill-based matchmaking system in the game, which is no surprise. There always has been, at least to some degree, in Call of Duty. But it is also worth noting that that correlation appeared to be stronger with our past 5 games, and therefore, as far as we can tell with this trend at least, it does appear that your recent performance is what matters more so than your career stats, although the career stats are also correlated here. And this trend does follow suit with the past couple years of testing that we've done with skill-based matchmaking, and therefore, I think we're seeing a very similar system, if not exactly the same system. Now, having said that, I was just curious to look back at my old studies to see what kind of lobbies I was running into with my main account. Keeping in mind with my performance in Call of Duty, I pretty much plateaued like 8 to 10 years ago when it comes to my skill level, so it hasn't really changed much over the past couple years. And what I've noticed here, if I look at that past 5 game average with my testing that I did in Cold War and Modern Warfare compared to Vanguard, is even though my performance in Vanguard was higher over the past 5 games, the average past 5 KD of my lobbies was actually very noticeably lower than the past couple years. In the past couple years, it was actually very consistent, but this year, it's noticeably lower. And this does seem to match the experience that I've had since Vanguard launched as well. I feel like the lobbies have been a little bit easier than I remember from the past couple years of Call of Duty, although still above average and still a night and day difference compared to when I play on a bot account or even an average account. It doesn't seem as strict or as sweaty as a lot of people would call it when I'm playing on my main account with my higher stats. And I just found this to be really interesting. Now, like I said, you can't perfectly compare across games like this, so this isn't a 100% confirmation that it's weaker this year. It's just a little trend that I noticed in the data, and I've also noticed from my anecdotal experience. And I've heard this from a lot of other people as well, as they said that it feels like it's less strict this year. And this could be due to various factors. It could be that they actually toned it down a little bit, or it could be that there's just fewer higher skilled players playing this game as opposed to the previous 2 years, and therefore they have to widen those parameters a little bit to get lobbies together. And speaking of getting lobbies together and potentially widening certain parameters with matchmaking, let's have a look at the matchmaking speed per account, as well as the average latency that I experienced while I was doing this testing with the various accounts. Because last year in Cold War, there was a significant difference between playing on my high skill, like my main account, compared to the average or lower skill account when it came to my connection quality. So there was actual evidence that my connection quality was being sacrificed in order to get me a better skill match. And I wanted to see if that's the same this year with Vanguard, which when we look at this brief comparison here, it definitely takes longer on average to find a game with my main account compared to the average account. And then with the low skill account, that was able to find matches even faster than Soshi's average account. So it does seem like the potential player pool for you to connect to seems to shrink quite a bit as you become more skilled. And it does appear that this also had an effect on my connection quality, although not nearly to the same extent as we saw in Cold War. So the average ping that I saw with my main account was 86. With Soshi's account, the average account, it was just a little bit lower at 81, and then with the low skill account, it was 73. Now, this isn't a massive discrepancy, and in a lot of the lobbies, I was seeing the exact same ping no matter which account I was playing on. I often average like a 70 ping in many of my lobbies, but what I found is with my lower skill account and the average account too, I was more likely to find those better connection lobbies, whereas with my main account, it definitely seems that the system is willing to sacrifice at least some of your connection quality in order to get a better skill match, and it also takes longer to get that better skill match if you are an outlier in the matchmaking system. And this is really disappointing to see. Like I said, these weren't quite as extreme as the results I saw with Cold War at least, but it still frustrates me knowing that because I'm a higher skilled player, I'm not necessarily always going to be getting the best connection experience, and instead it seems like that experience can be sacrificed in order to get me a better skill match. And with that, those are the primary things that I wanted to be looking at with this study, but there are a few other interesting things I just wanted to point out here, and I'm just going to fly through this section a little bit quickly, just some things I noticed throughout my data collection. And the first thing is with the party situation. Like I said, I did my best to collect data on who was playing with who, if there were any parties in my lobbies. And while it wasn't perfect, and I'm sure I didn't catch every party that I was actually playing against, one thing I noticed is with my high skill account, a lot of the lowest skilled players that I ran into throughout all of these games that I played, they were partied up with somebody that had really good stats and should have been playing in my lobbies, like should have been in a higher skill lobby. And then on the flip side of that, with the bot account or the low skill account, some of the highest skilled players that I ran into, or the players with the highest stats that I ran into, they were partied up with somebody that had significantly below average stats. And what this seems to imply to me is if you party up with somebody that is significantly different stats-wise to you, it seems like it can go in either direction. It's either going to put you in a really difficult lobby where the low-skill player is just going to have a terrible time and they're going to struggle so much to compete, or it might do the opposite and pull you guys into a low-skill lobby where the higher-skill player is going to dominate and the lower-skill player is basically right at home. And this is another thing that kind of lines up with my experience playing as well. When I party up, which I do basically all the time when I'm live streaming, which by the way, if you guys haven't checked out the live stream, I will leave a link to it down below. But when I live stream, I open it up so anybody's welcome to join. Any of my viewers can just hop in and play with me. And when I do this, I notice that I get a huge mix of lobbies. Sometimes I get super easy lobbies. I drop V2s in those lobbies, no problem. And then other times we have really competitive matches that are super difficult. And we even lose a lot of the matches that we play, even though we're fully partied up. So it really seems like the more people you have in a party, the more likely you are to get a mixed experience, which is what many of us want to see. That's what I like about playing in a party, is I get a good mixed experience. I never know what kind of lobby I'm going to get into. And with that, there's just one last thing I wanted to mention. Throughout my data collection here, I did separate based on teams because I wanted to test the team balancing as well to see how prominent it was. And keep in mind with the teammate averages here, this is excluding the account that I was testing on. And what you'll notice here, especially with my main account, is on average, my enemies are going to be noticeably better than my teammates. And this is seen in the career kill death ratio, the past 5 KD average kill death ratio, as well as the score per minute values. If you are a higher skilled player with higher skilled stats and you're playing solo, your enemies are generally going to be better than your teammates. And you're really going to have to pick up the slack if you want to be winning your games on a very consistent basis. Because of course, these are averages. Sometimes you can just coast through and you'll still get the win regardless. Whereas if you look at the average and the lower skill accounts, there's not as much of a discrepancy, especially when we're looking at recent performance stats. They're pretty comparable on both teams, and therefore it's not really up to you to decide the outcome of that match. And with that, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for today's video on the skill-based matchmaking in Vanguard. As for my final thoughts and sort of conclusion that I can draw from these trends that I've noticed, it does appear that we're seeing a very similar skill-based matchmaking system to the previous couple years where your recent performance seems to be more important than anything else. However, it doesn't appear to be as strict or as strong as the previous couple of years, or there's something else going on where there's just fewer high-skilled players that are playing the game now, or maybe those high-skilled players, they're gravitating toward Blitz because, like I said, I wasn't recording any data from Blitz. This is all from tactical modes. I'm not too sure what's going on there, but in either case, it does seem that the skill-based matchmaking system may be a little bit weaker than the past couple years. And like I said earlier, this does line up with my anecdotal experience with Vanguard as well. I've noticed that I'm able to go off and have really good games a lot more often, even though my lobbies on average are still going to be higher skilled or above average. And don't get me wrong, there is still a very clear difference in the lobbies between my low skill bot account and my higher skill account. Like, it's a night and day difference. I'm sure you've seen in the gameplay in the background how hilarious it can be being in those bot lobbies and just sort of messing around with people. But yeah, at least with my higher skill account, it doesn't seem quite as sweaty or competitive as the past couple of years. And with that, that is going to wrap it up for today's video. I'm not going to be doing a whole section talking about my thoughts and opinions on skill-based matchmaking in COD, just because I've beaten this horse to death so many times over the past few years. I don't like the current system they're using, especially because of the lack of transparency, and also because it appears your connection quality can be sacrificed. That's all I'm going to say on this. There's a lot more I could say, and I have said about it in the past, though. And this is where I want to hear from you guys in the comment section below. First up, were you surprised to see any of these results? And also, does this match up with your experience playing the game as well? If you are a higher skilled player, for instance, have you noticed that in Vanguard, things seem to be a little bit easier than they have been over the past couple years? Just let me know all of those thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.